Hello there, my name's James Kelly, and welcome along to the latest captivating instalment of this Scot Goes Popcast. And this is, I believe, episode 17 of the podcast, and it's just a quick one, really, because as we know, the dreadfully neutral and unbiased and objective Labour supporting media in Scotland are beside themselves with excitement about the Labour surge, or so-called Labour surge in the opinion polls, which is leading to all this excited speculation about the potential of SNP voters moving across en masse to the Labour Party and potentially the Labour Party taking lots of seats from the SNP at the general election. But there is a great paradox here, because if you look at the opinion polls, neither of those things are happening. The votes that Labour are taking are almost, well, largely, the vast majority of them are coming from the Conservative Party, not from the SNP. The SNP's vote is held up. And in addition to that, if you look at the seats projections from those polls, the SNP are actually gaining seats for the most part, because although Labour are taking a small number of gains from the SNP, that's being offset, more than offset, by the SNP gaining all 6 Conservative seats in Scotland. But in a way, it's a kind of like what's going on is a kind of fake it until it's real process. You know, the media, the Labour Party want to talk this up, talk the possibility of a kind of SNP swing to Labour, so that, you know, it becomes like a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's true that it probably wouldn't take that much more of a swing to Labour, particularly if those votes were coming from the SNP, to produce significant seat losses, lots of seats changing hands from the SNP to Labour. So it is a concern potentially, even though that's not where we are. So I thought I'd just look into this and see how much there would have to be a further swing, or the start of a swing from the SNP to Labour, a genuine swing, for seats to start going in significant numbers. And so I'm looking at the electoral calculus seats projector, which is not ideal. It's not a perfect projection model, but it gives us a rough idea. And just for simplicity, I'm using the current boundaries at Westminster, not the proposed new boundaries. It probably doesn't make that much difference, but that's what I'm doing. So we'll just sort of incrementally change the position and see what would have to happen for Labour to gain a significant number of seats. So at the moment, the average of the polls, the most recent polls, have the SNP on 45%, Labour on 31%, the Conservatives on 14%, and Liberal Democrats on 7%. So let's assume, maybe a dangerous assumption, but let's assume the Conservatives have gone as low as they're going to go, and that all the changes will be from the SNP to Labour, and the Conservatives will just keep on 14%, will keep the Liberal Democrats on 7%. So at the moment, the seats projection on the current average is 52 for the SNP, 5 for Labour, 2 for the Liberal Democrats, and none for the Conservatives. So if you just change the percentages slightly, move the SNP down to 44% of the vote, Labour up to 32%, a few seats do go, and the SNP go down to 48, although, you know, that's the exact number they won at the last election. Labour go up to 8, the Liberal Democrats go up to 3, tongue twister, but the Conservatives stay on 0. So then if we move it a little bit more and give the SNP 43% of the vote and Labour 33, a little bit more movement. The SNP are down to 46 seats now, Labour are up to 10, the Lib Dems stay on 3. Move it a little bit further, the SNP on 42% of the vote, Labour on 34%. In that situation, the SNP lose another 4 seats, down to 42, Labour are up to 14, and Liberal Democrats stay on 3, still the Conservatives on 0. But then, if we move it to 41% of the vote for the SNP and 35% of the vote for Labour, something interesting happens, because the SNP drop dramatically to only 34 seats. Labour go up to 18, the Lib Dems go up to 5, but the Conservatives suddenly hold 2 seats. And so what's happening there is by the Labour Party gaining votes at the expense of the SNP, even though the Conservatives, we're assuming they stay on 14% of the vote, suddenly the Labour surge is helping the Conservatives to retain 2 seats. So if we move on to the SNP on 40% of the vote, Labour on 36%, a very tight lead. The SNP go down to 33 seats, barely a majority of Scottish seats. Labour are now up to 19, the Lib Dems stay on 5, the Conservatives stay on 2. But then if we move to a situation where the SNP only have a 2% lead, they're on 39% of the vote, and Labour are on 37, then it's almost even Stevens in the seats projection. And now the SNP do not have a majority of the seats in Scotland. They only have 27 out of the 59. Labour have 24. The Liberal Democrats have 5, but the Conservatives are now up to 3. So the higher Labour are going, the more seats the Conservatives are holding. And then finally, if you move it to a 38 tie in the percentage of the vote, then that actually puts Labour ahead in terms of seats. They have 26, the SNP have 25, Lib Dems have 5, and the Conservatives have 3. So I started off this process to look at what would happen to the Labour seats and the danger for the SNP of a Labour surge, but actually the danger is more for the people of Scotland, is it not? Because if, as Labour keep telling us, if the real objective is to stop the Tories, then it's a matter of some concern that a Labour surge is helping the Conservatives keep a toehold in Scottish seats. So it's a rather different story from the one they want to portray of how Scotland needs to unite behind Labour to kick the Tories out. In fact, the reverse is happening, and well, of course, the electoral calculus model may well be wrong. It's not taking account of tactical voting, and it may well be that even if there's a Labour surge, that the SNP would hold on to those people who would otherwise vote Labour in those 6 constituencies they're trying to take from the Conservatives. But nevertheless, it's not the story we're being told by the media. It's not the story we're being told by Labour. To some extent, it is the case that voting Labour can help the Conservatives in Scotland, and that really it's the largest pro-independence party that is standing in the way of the Conservatives and giving the best hope of a Tory-free Scotland as we had in 1997. So that was just a quick thought, just a quick something that I noticed. So that was the very quick episode 17 of the Scot Goes Popcast. And there will be an episode 18 at some point. But in the meantime, keep checking the Scot Goes Pop blog for all the latest Scottish political news and polling news as well. So until next time, see you later.